Okay guys, in this video we're going to continue on with compression and scaling and start talking about scenes. But before we jump into that, I just wanted to talk about just a good place to start from. So maybe you're coming into this and you're like, okay, well, I know I want to prototype a railroad, and I want to be able to prototype from point A to point B, and maybe your point A to point B is 15 miles. How would you do that? Well, if you look down here on the lower right hand corner of Google Earth, you've got this number here, and that number is roughly the measurement, the distance from here to here. So you can see as we roll out, that number changes. So say you wanted to model, say I wanted to change my prototype from 2 miles to, say, I wanted to prototype 5 miles. What would the compression ratio be? So let's just go ahead and start rolling out. Let's see, first let's figure out in feet. So it'd be 5 times, for 5 miles times 5,280, because that's how many feet are in a mile. So we're looking for a number down here of roughly around 26,400. So just rolling out here a little bit more. Notice I keep on pushing that back over. Oh, we're too far now. What I say, 26,000 right there. That'll be good. So that's right. You can see the railroad. It comes up here and it winds up through here and it goes like this right here. So from here to roughly about in here is about 5 miles. If I wanted to model that much of the railroad, what would my compression ratio look like? Well, what I did here is I took our formula here and I just rearranged the variables in it. So in order to get a compression ratio, what we would do is we would come in here and take our calculator and go 1 minus, and I'm going to put this in parentheses here. So remember, the scale miles for my layout is 0.8, so I'm going to type in 0.8 and divide that by the miles that I'm wanting to model, the total miles I'm wanting to model. So that's going to be 0.8 divided by 5, right? And so that gives us 0.84, which is 84%. I mean, if you wanted to multiply that times 100 to convert that to percent, it'd be 84%. So for my railroad, if I wanted to model 5 miles of a section of railroad, I'm going to have to compress my layout 84%. Now, I say that again with the disclaimer. That's well. Let's look at that for a second. So, 100 minus 84. So that means I could actually model 16% of that section of railroad with a 1-to-1 mapping. Again, that's just if you're trying to actually model to scale a portion of that railroad that's out there. You're only going to be able to model 16%. So you can think of you're compressing your railroad to determine how long and even how wide you can you can model, but you can also think about compressing a second time. And what I mean by that is compressing things like physical features along that section of railroad, like buildings and things like that. So you would be able to reclaim some of that back. Again, this only being able to model 16% is if I'm rigidly holding to the fact that I want all my models on my railroad to be exactly to scale as to what's out there. So I hope that's making a little bit of sense. What I wanted to talk about in this video as well was just talk about scenes. So let's see, back on our example, we came to the conclusion that that I'm going to model 2 miles of a section of this railroad here, and that if I wanted to maintain a 1-to-1 mapping, that I could actually only model 40%. Okay, so we know that again, there's 5,280 feet in a mile. So if we take 2 miles times 5,280, that gives us 10,560. Now if I multiply that times the 40% or 0.4, which is what we can actually model, that gives us 4,224. So that would be the length in feet of actually what we can model, again, if we were trying to maintain that one-to-one mapping, not compress our buildings or anything. So so let's go ahead and just draw a circle with that radius there. I'm just going to copy that number, minimize that. And I tell you what, before I do that though, I'm going to come over here and create another layer, and I'm going to call it scene. Turn my cap lock on there, scene. And I'm going to make the color, I'm going to make it red, so hopefully it'll show up better on the screen. Oh, I didn't make that my current layer. Let me go back in here. Scene, got the current layer. Okay, so let's just start off by drawing a circle. Okay, so if I draw a circle, just click anywhere on the screen to give it a radius or a base point, and I'm just going to paste in that number I got from my calculator, that 4,224. So if I drew a line from, say, the center of the circle, anywhere on that circle, that's how much I could actually model on the 2 miles here. Okay, so if we wanted to, what I like to do is I like to come in here and pick out, key features, what I would like to model. So maybe I want to model, this area right in here. Okay, and that's a little blurry now that we've scaled it up, but maybe I want to get this in here, and maybe I want to get, I don't know, maybe this industrial part right through here. Okay, so I mean, and that again, that's based on a one-to-one mapping. So I can come in here and do this, and if that's basically, that'd be 2 different views, right? So we know that this is all I can map here. So if I just take that line and copy it, and then I'm just going to scale it 0.5. Okay, turn my entity snap on here. So what that means is if this is the total distance that I can actually model, if I'm being rigid and trying to hold to a one-to-one mapping, and I'm going to keep on saying that because I don't want you guys to feel like you're locked into that 40%, because you're not. But if I was to lock myself into that 40%, then if I had 2 views, this is about how long each view would be. So let's copy that over here somewhere. So let me turn my objects entity snap off and then do that. What it's doing is it's trying to snap to the frame around this image here. Turn it off. Okay, so if we come in here and drew a line, and then say our other line, what was it? We talked about this area right up in here. Yeah. And you know what? Let me make those different colors now that I think about it, because our path is drawn at on a red color. Let me make it this. Let me make it this cayenne blue color. There we go. So I'm going to make it a little thicker too, so it shows up. So again, you just click on it, come down here to Properties window, and you can give it a global width. I'm going to say, see what 1 looks like. That's barely showing up. Let's give it a 10. Getting a little better. Yep. Let's give it a 100. There we go. That'll work. I'm just doing this to try to help make it easier to see. Let me give this one a width of 100 too. Okay, so 40% of our railroad we'd be able to model would look like this right here. And here I'm just kind of rotating it in. So, you're looking at something kind of roughly similar to that. And you can subdivide that 40% however you want. I just chose to subdivide it into two 20% sections of the total length. Or not the total length. Well, yeah, the total length, because we're only going to be able to model 40%. So, so you get into this area in here, and like I was saying in the previous video, you could probably compress this parking lot here, and you can make some of that up. You could distribute that elsewhere, and maybe reclaim some of your area back. You may be looking at this video and going, well, it's not very much to model, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm limited on what I can model because my railroads, this example that we're using, is not a very big railroad. Obviously the bigger your railroad, the more you can model. I mean, it's common sense. So, but again, this is holding to our formula and saying, okay, well, I'm going to model with a mapping of 1-to-1. All my building is going to be the exact same distance out there. So when I come in and I get ready to scratch build this building and make it look just like that, then it's going to be exactly this wide and well, even this long, I guess, if it's included in your scene as a whole. But this building may have one doorway on it, and you can get by with just you can compress this building here, say 75 or 25%, and get away with it. Well, that enables you to make this whole area in here a little bit shorter, which means you can kind of, maybe push your scene out this way more, or even this way more, but I'd probably compress this right here, this parking lot here. And, so when you think about scenes, and this is what I wanted to talk about here, is, you think about scenes, you think about, okay, well, you want your scene to transition smoothly into the next scene, right? So you have to also kind of think about that. If you're really trying to mimic what's actually out there, then you would probably want to include this Y in as a scene, which means you're going to lose some of this, or you're going to have to give up some of this, but some type of transition into the next scene. It's just whatever you want, whatever you're willing to give up, whatever you want to keep in the railroad. I mean, so if we went back into our example here, and say for my railroad, which is only 0.8 scaled miles, if I wanted to model 15 miles, if I went to Google Maps and picked out a stretch of railroad that's 15 miles, well, my compression ratio would look like this. If we take 1 minus, and then in parentheses again, 0.8 divided by 15. I mean, my compression ratio is almost 95%. So what does that mean? Well, that means if I try to hold a 1-to-1 mapping on the buildings and everything, I can only really model about 5% of that, as far as physical features like structures and things like that. So I mean, if you go by those guidelines, it wouldn't make sense for me with my small layout to try to model 15 miles and still try to maintain any type of prototypical the realism, get as close to reality as I can. Does that mean that you can't do it? Well, you can't model 95% with a compression ratio of 95%. Absolutely, absolutely you can model a compression ratio of 95%. You may have something on your layout that denotes down there where the Y was, and then maybe some woods, and then maybe up to the next city or whatever, or little town. But you're gonna lose out a lot on a lot of the what's really out there. So again, I hope this helps out. It helps me because I can come in here and then begin to pick out the main scenes that I want to pick out main physical features, and then I can kind of start allocating, you know, in our example, I can start allocating that 40% along the actual length of the area I'm modeling, and figure out what it is I'm going to actually include in my model. So it's not as challenging, you know, perpendicular to the right of way as it is, you know, from point A to point B. So guys, I hope this helps you out, you know. And again, just real quickly, you know, I just chose to subdivide that 40%, you know, subdivide it 2 times. But, you know, you could subdivide it as many times as you want, and then just distribute those little scene segments, if you will, along your total railroad in order to pick up what it is you want to model. So guys, probably in the next video, I'm actually going to talk more about track design, and we'll start looking at that and setting layers up for that. So guys, this you know, this would be a good place to get on Google Maps and start trying to figure out, you know, what area it is you want to map along your railroad. So we'll see you in the next video.